Uh, okay, so welcome. Tonight we're exploring Pathwork Guide Lecture 218. It was originally received February 6, 1974, and it's titled The Evolutionary Process. And I just also did today on my sort of radio blog that I do every other Wednesday. I read this lecture as well. I think it's a really beautiful lecture for people even new to the pathwork in some ways, and kind of has some radical ideas in the heart of it that I kind of really like. So we'll see, where it goes with you guys. It's more, again, one of the more metaphysical types of lectures in some ways, but I think it also applies deeply to our, way of working with our everyday life. So let's see how it goes. He begins, "Greetings, my very dearest friends. Blessings for all of you here. Happiness and love follow truth. The commitment to truth, whatever it may be. Deep in your heart is the seed for all these potentials: truth, love, happiness, wisdom, and peace. You possess these attributes, these states of being, in ample quantity and quality. It is up to you to realize them, which you do by first conceiving of these potentialities deep inside of your innermost being. You then conceive of spreading out these slumbering potentials to awaken and spread them so they grow from within you into the outer regions of your life. The topic of tonight's lecture is the process of the evolutionary journey, for it is a journey. You begin to notice this process increasingly as you grow through your efforts on your path as an organic reality that communicates itself to you. So it's hard. This is a very difficult concept to kind of express. He makes a couple of good attempts at it, but I just want to highlight it. Do kind of follow what he's saying here, that this, process, this journey, it's like as we kind of take it on and work with it, it begins to kind of be a reality that's in relationship to us in some way. It's like a dance, kind of things happen, who you meet, the events of the life, like there's some of that, we can see like, oh, I, got upset and so I created, a problem there. But, it's like oftentimes just things are out of the blue, that we have to deal with and cope with and, change and undertakings. And so all of these things, when we get some perspective, start to begin to feel like it's personal. Does that make sense?
Well, we'll keep going here and see.
So, so in the beginning of your path, you sense it only vaguely and occasionally, but as you progress, you become more anchored in truth inside of you, and you see this process unfolding as an alive, organismic event. So your process, your life process, is something sort of bigger than just you, and it includes outer events, crises, tragedy, unfold, how things happen, And so everybody in this world, goes through these kinds of factors of, meeting somebody and, that changes a life, or losing somebody and that changes a life, and, different jobs and all kinds of things, right? That just unfold. And if we can see this as this a living organic process, I think it can help us relate to it in a way that actually, improves the the dynamic and the success with it. There's a way that it becomes guidance. I have one of my hymns that says, your life is your guide, right? And so it's reflecting back, it's showing, it's talking to you all the time. And whatever you're encountering, the guide says, in many places, it's like it's a perfect mirror of something inside of you. So is that making sense?
Yes.
So the mistake you make is in believing that this organismic event, this process, is a result of your decision to follow the path. But he says really, it's always ongoing. It's like, it's like when we make a decision to follow, we kind of bring it more into awareness and consciousness. But if you even look back, you can see it's always been there. So he says this process exists always. The only difference is that when you are not on the path, that activates awareness of your inner reality. When you are still in blindness and ignorance about yourself and therefore commensurately about the universe, you must also be totally unaware that this process is going on in you. So first of all, it is extremely important that you understand the difference, my friends. The process is not something that happens only after you enter a developmental path. Entering and progressing on such a path enables you to focus your awareness on something that has always existed, but you have not noticed. And you will be able to follow the process by involving the ego personality rather than letting it stay behind. So this is another aspect of awakening consciousness. And in that sense, this lecture is a sequel of a preceding one. He says consciousness does not happen suddenly. It is rather a process of awakening to something that has always been there. So most of us have had this experience, like over time, over our work, where all of a sudden something begins to crystallize and take shape. And, we've heard it 1,000 times, but now we're like recognizing it in ourselves and really seeing it, Is that, anybody remember that? So because, it's always been there and time is an illusion of the limited mind. The limitation of the mind is responsible for not perceiving what is there. As the mind becomes less limited, it becomes capable of perceiving what is there. And it will make all the difference for you, my friends. Not to confuse this with the sequence of events, for this perception will activate an aspect of your consciousness that is still slumbering, your power to perceive in reality. And I think some of what he's saying here too, that, it's like we often, look back and say, well, why didn't I see that before, or whatever. And he's saying, it's like, it wasn't possible, right? It's like these things are unfolding. And, so if it is, he's saying it's not totally a sequence of events that's happening, but those sequences are coming from our own inner development. And so when we're ready, then we all of a sudden begin to awaken in some way to it being there. So you may begin to conceive of the process of your inner evolutionary journey as always being present and ongoing, whether you know it or not. Let us speak more specifically now about this process so that you will obtain further help in self-understanding and begin to focus in the right direction. I might define this evolutionary process that exists within all aspects of consciousness, all entities, and all organismic realities as an ongoing journey. I mean, that's a big thing he's saying, like there's this journey that all consciousness takes. Any entities, we assume all entities have some level of consciousness, and all organismic realities also seem to be, entities in some way. Even, even ecological entities, like certain forests and stuff, we're in a holarchy of things, right? And all of those things are, interconnected as well. And all of them have their own ongoing journeys as well. So then he talks about, and I think it's a great analogy, he says, people often have dreams in which they are either on a train ride or are about to take a train and anxious that they may miss it, or have missed the train, or are getting off it. Almost all human beings have these recurrent dreams. They are universal dreams that come sporadically. When they come, they convey your relationship to your own process. Do you follow the train's movement, or do you stay behind? The process goes on as the train continues its ride, but the ego consciousness has a choice. It can choose to go with it or to stay behind. The choices are not always consciously made, but they are nevertheless made in distinct intentionality. Incidentally, when you do not happen to have a train dream, it is not an indication or proof that you are following the inner journey. The unconsciousness may not have succeeded in sending its message, at least through the dream, right? So, but it's a good question, just even to ask inside, like, are you still on the train, like, or as part of you, and what parts of you are and what parts of you aren't. For example, when you choose to enter such a path, to search within yourself and make more meaning out of your life, that is as much of a choice as when you choose not to do so. Regardless of the rationales and excuses you may manufacture for yourself. When you live the day as if it did not matter, that is as active and distinct a choice as when you allow yourself to feel the inner urging to follow your inner journey. When you are passive and inert, it is as much of a choice as when you are active and take the initiative. These are all choices. Do you go with your inner evolutionary process, or do you stay behind? The choice is determined by how much you give in to the always existing fear and resistance that are so tragically misplaced. Because if you need to fear and resist anything, it is the non-movement of the stagnation, the denial of going with the process that evolves out of your innermost being as the wisest, most meaningful reality conceivable. So when we don't go with it, right, when we resist following the inner movement, that is so much wiser, so much more profound than what the human brain can think of. You make a weighty decision. And it is important for you to understand what that decision means. What does it imply? And also, what are its ramifications?
I have a question in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
What comes up for me is, right now in my life is, it feels like I'm without guidance, or the guidance is to just back up and not do anything. And that is uncomfortable. So, yeah, and my relationship here with Joyce is like she can't move any further. She won't, or whatever. And I'm having all kinds of issues with the international pathwork. I backed out of going up to Ottawa for, my judgments are they handled it stuff completely wrong. And anyway, it was a nightmare. And I had big issues with the recent Seven Oaks and Mid-Atlantic Pathwork, putting their supposedly the stuff together that turned out to be a fiasco. I'm in my inner side is going, is the pathwork is valid, but the people, I have all these judgments coming up, and I don't quite know what to do with it, and except be with it. But it seems to be just a floating process. I feel like I'm not going anywhere.
I think you have to excavate it, right? You have to delve into it a little more, because there's, on the conscious level, it's, like this, but it's kind of an emotional reaction, right? So there's a whole process that the pathwork teaches to work with in emotional reaction. So this might be good where you can do some work with this in group, right? And then, it's not a process of just get over it. It's a process of really understanding, like what makes you so, I mean, it's true. Like, I don't know, we screwed up, people screw up, and sometimes it can be very frustrating, but it's like, maybe there's something else more, going on there, right? Is a guess that I would have. So,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it looks like the going on that's messed up is on the other side of me.
oh yeah, you can always point your finger. Three fingers come back.
Yeah, no, I know, I know that phrase, but right now I don't see it, so I just throwing it out there.
Well, it's not even seeing that, where, I mean, you might be right and they might be wrong, but it's like, why does it matter such a big deal?
That's a real good point. It's like if I've been putting too much expectation in Pathwork people.
Yeah, where's your demand coming from and why? Because there's sort of a coin, and it seems to touch something. I mean, oftentimes when we get really angry or upset about something, at least when I do it, it's like it triggers my fear. If I can't get the support I need or I can't get the help I need, it's like I'm good. Like something's. And lately, there's a lot of primal fears. I mean, in general, around a lot of things, like not working, the internets and all of that stuff are just big headaches for most people. So.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, it's fear. It's like Pathwork has become kind of a foundation. And to me, it's been shaking now. So it's like, oh, it's a little, so there's fear there, yeah.
And so it's all good, good grist for the mill. The guide says, fear is, also part of the illusion somehow. So, and it doesn't really seem to help a situation, even if, there is a tiger there. So, I mean, certain ways of activating the adrenals, but, beyond that, it's a different thing. And most of the time what's happened is really we are getting triggered by something, where in the ER work, it's like you don't want to reject the emotional reaction because there's gold in it, right? That's like where the child work is, still trying to, come up. And that's how our life, is helping us do that, because it's going to give us circumstances that are going to trigger the shit out of us so that we keep feeling our reaction to certain things until we can recognize that it's like it's an overreaction, until we can recognize why it's coming up and how to help it. Right.
Well, I hear your words and I'm stay open to it, but I can't force it, obviously. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. And what you have to do is you have to go in and let all of the voices speak, because, like right now, there's distortion and divinity on all sides of things, right? And you have to hold on to, from your inner authority, you have to hold what you understand as truth. And you also have to see where in an emotional reaction, there is some distortion of some kind happening. Otherwise, you wouldn't, you would be maybe making choices about your relationship to the pathwork, but you wouldn't be, all judgy about it.
Yeah, no, I hear your words, so I'm trying to stay open.
It's the work for all of us, right? We judge ourselves or we judge each other, and that's how we get off the path and lost. So, see where I was. How are you doing, Eileen? Any questions from you?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, so I've lost my train here.
I can't help you. Start where you want.
Okay. So I just think so when we choose to enter such a path to search within ourselves and make more meaning out of our life, this is much of a choice as when we choose not to do so. So I think I read that. You live the day as if it did not matter, right? Covered that. And passive, he says, when you are passive and inert, it is as much of a choice as when you are active. So choice is determined by how much you give to the always existing fear and resistance that are so tragically misplaced. Because if you need to fear and resist anything, it is non-movement. The stagnation, the denial of going with the process, right? That in this case, like the process is bringing these feelings up. So, you want to go with it, but you don't want to identify completely of, oh, the truth is, everything's terrible. It's coming up to bring to light something for you. So going with the process, which is evolving out of your innermost being. And it's bringing this stuff up to be in the light, right? It may not be the wisest, but it's a part of the process. It's the wisest, most meaningful reality conceivable. Why is this happening to me? Because the universe needs me to go in and face and feel and understand this feeling inside of me, this reaction within me. How can consciousness evolve except by having that experience? So, we're often presented with things we don't like that, we react to, that, everything, but it really is, again, I think the wisdom of this conscious, intentional universe, like that knows exactly where we're still working, right? And so, either we're going to create it out of our own expectations and our own defenses, or the universe will find some way to bring it out of us. Because, we're anything like that's happening, it's really for us to bring light to our own inner process. What does it make us feel? And what are we, doing with that? What meaning do we give that? How do we work with that? Are we trying to stuff it? Are we holding in? Are we holding back? Are we holding on? Are we holding out or holding together? Are we, like, how are we blocking the flow, stopping the train? So it's important for you to understand, that these decisions have ramifications. And even if the general decision for such a path has been made, we're still, like, part of us may be yes, along with the movement of the train, but other parts are still in resistance. I mean, I know after all of these years, for me, there are certain areas that, are still, stuck and still aligned with not truth at some level, right? Don't have the good news, have not received the healing yet. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong, or, like with me or the path or anything. It just means that it's a journey and it's a process and it takes time.
What if you
So
don't have enough time to go through all of them?
we don't usually, yeah. I mean, the guides, that's part of why the guide's saying, we spend many lifetimes. And I think in this lecture, he makes the allusion to a soul contract of several lifetimes around the same theme, right?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I know that the surrendering and not, I've been continue to work on trying to surrender. And yesterday I was trying to surrender to the uncomfortable feelings of fear inside me, and I just couldn't do it. I ran right up into a wall, and I could feel the resistance to that, the resistance to the surrender, because I feel like if I could surrender when I'm having these feelings, uncomfortable feelings, like tightness in the chest, feeling like I'm not breathing, whatever, not getting enough air, whatever, that if I could just surrender myself, I truly believe that would be all I would need to do. But I could feel it. I stopped it. So the resistance is, and I understand a little bit about the resistance, why I resist, because I'm afraid to let go.
Right.
I'm afraid to change. And I know
Right.
that in evolutionary, I am in this evolutionary process, I think my purpose in this life is to surrender to all these things and just be with it. I think that would change my whole life.
Be okay as you are.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and know that all of this that you're carrying, doesn't make you bad or a failure, or, it's like, it's your hero's journey. You're carrying a lot, there's a lot of, clan trauma, and maybe even ancestral stuff, that, and every one of us in some ways is doing that. Right. So we want to have great, understanding and honor for every life that is lived, because we're always living it at the greatest possible capacity that we can in any given moment, and that's the other way that we kind of sink ourselves, because we always kind of second guess and judge ourselves and judge others, and so then it's just kind of like keeps us stuck in this place of fear. We become our own inner terrorists in some way, right? Because there's not an acceptance. And I think what you're talking about in surrender is true there. I think that maybe at the physical level, you might explore a slightly different word. I don't know if it would help, but think of it in terms of like relaxing around, like to feel like sort of grounding into the earth, relaxing your body into something that supports it. And that's a part of where, I think also we need to develop this higher self connection, that we also feel somehow in our adult ego, that can come and sort of be with that fear. Because I think in trauma, we were traumatized in it because nobody was there to hold us.
Right.
And we can't relax into it until we feel like somebody's there holding us. And then we can let go. And then, that releasing often can, surrender and heal. And
yeah, I mean that somebody is there for me, or that there's a higher self, even inside me and outside me. There's guardian angels, whatever, that. So what you're saying is that I have to believe in a force bigger than me to hold that part of me. Is that
right,
what you're
exactly.
saying?
Yes. And also that you yourself have to hold all of yourself, because if you are rejecting any part of yourself, you won't allow everything to be held, right? So it's like, to me, it's like Russian nesting dolls, right? We have our, wounded part, our traumatized part. It needs to be held by our more adult ego presence and self-love, honoring of all we carry, what we've been through, understanding, it's a big bite we took off. It's not an easy journey, having compassion, having, love and understanding for ourselves. And in that we can pray, we can ask, we can, ask for the help for this part that's still, resistant, still too scared, too wounded, or right. And
I do that. I do end up, I really begging for help. Just please help me hold this part of me that is so scared and so alone, and so that feels these feelings. And yeah.
so
That's a
notice in a way, like, though, like, I get it, when we're in pain or when we're suffering, like, we tense up and we pray, but it's kind of like from that place, I think we send it up there, but nothing can come back in, like we're so stuck in this posture that we can't receive what the universe might be trying to give, in terms of, it's a subtle energy, right, that comes over us that we can feel comforted by. And if we're all tense, it's like, so we have to be able to pray with faith. We have to be able to pray with patience, with trust that, even if it's not happening right this moment, right, that it's on its way. and also that it's possibly here right now in ways that if we listen and try to relax as best we can, that we can connect with more.
Okay, yeah, I do. I do more of a push or pull, trying to pull it in, or like begging for help. Or yeah, I can see what you're saying. You have to kind of pray with, you know, you know, to ask with patience and just believing and trusting that's going to come. There's the rub. Maybe I don't think or trust or believe that it's going to come, and that's why it doesn't come.
I mean, the guide says, we would all be patient if we knew the results were certain. So,
Yeah,
right, there
yeah,
is some, like future, like we, and the fear again, so like this is part of, I think in the awakening journey where, we have to keep walking into unknowing and not knowing, right? The ego's defense is to know, and it doesn't ever know anything really, so we have to learn to trust again this, what this lecture is talking about, this inner movement that's carrying us, and
yeah,
let go into that, and not try to control it or interfere or, and judge
yeah.
ourselves around it. So
Yeah, it's not easy, but yeah, that's the road. Thank you.
it's not easy, and it is a journey, and yeah, it's all practice, right? All we can do really is practice. So yeah, so he says, you see, my friends, in psychic reality, it is possible to be on the train in some respects. Okay, we covered that, not on others. And so your inner movement follows its innate plan. And when the ego gets off, the inner movement still goes on. It is then so much more difficult to catch up when you are in such a predicament. You experience long drawn out states of disharmony, anxiety, crisis, depression, and upheaval. So, kind of this is where, like, he says the spiritual meaning of crisis comes in, because, it is like when we're resisting the movement, the life force, something's got to give. And he says the life force is more powerful than our resistance. And it's, really doesn't want to create crisis, but sometimes that's the best thing to shake up the existing structure enough, to bring some new possibility in, and reevaluation. But so we often are like with ourselves in certain ways, and we're behind ourselves in others. And so again, it's not like a big thing to judge about, but again, to just be aware, like where you have some disharmony, it's probably because there's some work that's there that needs to be worked with. So it is, of course, realistically quite impossible to always follow the inner movement exactly 100%. Were you that aware, you would not be in the human state. The human state is in itself the result of disconnection, and thus you need to struggle to find the connection again with the inner reality. No human being, no path follower can boast of never going through periods of darkness and crisis. They are inevitable, and it is good that way, because these very states are reminders, messages, and signposts to spur you on to make a redoubled effort to find again the harmony with the inner meaning of the acts of the individual process. So, when we can understand the process and see that it's really, trying to take us somewhere or up against our, it's like it's calling for healing to a block or a resistance, right? So then we can, pay attention and redouble our effort to find harmony with, what is trying to come, and work with releasing some of the resistance so that we don't have to create an earthquake inside. I am speaking here of protracted states of disharmony, of escape, of resistance on a larger scale to deal with certain areas of the self. And then the question can be simply stated as follows. Are you totally committed to all of yourself, to the whole truth, to complete non-avoidance and surrender to the will of God? Well, what is the will of God, right? that's a whole interesting discussion. But I think what he's saying here in some ways is if the universe is unfolding, as part of our journey and, interacting with, our intention, to evolve in consciousness, then the will of God is probably what's happening right now. And, it may not be, we may discover that, like the will of God is bringing up our resistance or our fear, but again, like it needs to come up in consciousness so that we can see it and begin to work with it, find ways of challenging it, question it, and seek, right? So it's not really God's will that you be punished or judged or anything like that. And he talks about this later. So only you can give a truthful answer to this question. You can easily know the answer if you wish to know it. You can determine if and how you hold out. What are the areas where you hold back, make reservations, where you deny the holy process of your inner movement into divine reality? Some form of battle is always required to make you understand the signs, the messages, the directions of your inner process, so as to get into its swing again. Each stopping is more than a delay, more of a delay than you realize. When I speak of delay, I don't want to give the impression that you should be hasty and rushed in your mental attitude, but that you should realize and learn to tune in again on this movement, this flow of your process, and learn to kind of use it to help you go with things and learn to understand its messages and its meanings, as well as the meaning of your fear and the resistance that makes you get off the train and stay behind. If you truly examine the simple core of the fear and resistance and translate its meaning, what will inevitably come to the surface is something like this. I do not trust divine reality. I do not trust divine life. I do not trust my higher self. I do not trust God's creation and God's will for and in me. I rather trust my ego defenses and protective blockings. No matter how destructive they may happen to be, I may regret this destructiveness, but since I trust it more than God, I continue with it. You rather trust the pseudo-reality of your misconceptions, of your fears and defenses or false safety of illusions, of the laziness and allure of the line of least resistance. You particularly trust the illusion that it is not necessary to move along with your evolutionary process. Thus, you deny yourself the awareness that it even exists. So I don't know if this is referring to either of you guys so much. And again, maybe in certain areas we do. Like I always feel like, okay, I'm going to trust the universe to bring up what I have to pay attention to, because there's this whole long list, that I'm not ready to get to yet, but I'll probably get to it in time, and there's a kind of, again, flow. And so if I can relax about all of this thing that I think, maybe it's this or that I need to fix, all of that's illusion anyway, right? And so if I'm just working with what's arising for me in my moment-to-moment life, that I think is the best course, that we're following. And so we, trust this illusion that it's not necessary to move along with our evolutionary process. We fear it. And so we, sort of try to pretend we can just kind of hold on and stay stuck. But, deep down, we're unhappy with it, like we don't. And most of us are also, working, even though we're feeling the truth of the resistance, right? We're working with it because it's an inner conflict inside of us. One part is aligned with the resistance, and our higher self and our more adult consciousness knows its resistance and knows how it's impacting us in a way that's, blocking the love and the longing that we have. And so, we just have to keep coming up against that kind of crunch reality. And it's the puzzle on the blackboard. It's the writing on the wall that we have to work with. And he says, you distrust the beauty of the inner movement, and you trust stagnation. You distrust the truth and trust the denial of truth. You trust in closing your sensibilities to the messages of your process. You never even give yourself the chance to find out how much God, the process, truth, and total commitment to confronting all that is in you, and thus following your process can be trusted, while you despair about your constant disappointments, refusing to connect them with the fact that you consistently trust the wrong things. You choose to trust wishful thinking. You follow the motto that when you do not know, what you do not know does not exist and will not hurt you. You deny that you miss out on fulfilling the potential within you. And so some people are more into denial about this, and numbness, and some people are more, into like feeling anxious or depressed about it. Also, he talks about different character structures and different lectures and stuff. So this doesn't apply directly to you. It's fine. Just, see where it might. And thus you create more illusion, more false reality, and become more disconnected, confused, and empty, choosing not to understand why, and accusing life of being bad. You fear and resist the truth and beauty, the benign reality you could live in. All this may not apply to all of you, but even if it applies only to part of you, to some aspects, it represents waste and unnecessary struggle. So, basically, it's the work, it's like wherever we find resistance, right, inside of us, we need to, unravel it in some way. And it's only by doing that, in a kind of inner allied spirit of, again, supporting ourselves rather than trying to control ourselves, making us wrong, judging ourselves, right? So we have to ally with ourselves and realize, okay, so we need some help with these places of resistance. And so we're going to ask our higher self, and we're going to, bring our consciousness there and let go of some of this judgment. And it happens a lot easier. So ponder the question of misplaced trust and misplaced distrust that make you decide to get off the train and stay behind, even if only temporarily. It is very important that you account to yourself for your decisions and trust and confront these issues, even if you manage not to know that you are making decisions every day and every hour of your life. It's like, some of this it's going to be water under the bridge, but it's like, if we can pay attention, it's good. He's just inviting us to more awareness. These are decisions about what to think, about how to view events in your life and your reactions to them, about whether to direct your attention in your daily life to the outer projections of your inner realities or to the inner realities themselves. All these are decisions that you make constantly. If you tell yourself as to the meaning of these decisions, and they are indeed decisions, then you can stop the creation of the illusory and false reality. And a lot of this is what we're talking about, the projection onto other, people or the world, it's like a part of that, is, again, something that's coming up in us that we need to take responsibility for, and not just, think, well, if it wasn't happening there, I would be fine. So he goes into this a little bit too. So he says, it's therefore essential that you question yourself deeply about how you relate to your own process and what that means. Then when you have answered yourself, the next question should be, what is the meaning of this answer? Are you really allowing the inner movement to guide you? It is only at the beginning of each such decision that making it seems an effort, but that effort in itself is one of the illusions we create by constant belief in falsity. In this case, that non-movement is effortless and movement is struggle. So what in your lives maybe try to apply, like, is there some exact instance that you can think of that you can feel this movement versus non-movement, because he's spending some time in that kind of dynamic, right? Can you feel that inside of yourself? Just to try and ground it and bring this into more concrete.
Well, sometimes guidance isn't always clear. So it seems to be say one thing and then say something else, and it's trying to discern what the heck is going on here. Like for me, I like movement. I've always liked movement in my life, and what's happening is no movement. You know, I'm kind of
right.
And I kind of get these messages that just slow down and relax. And
I think
that's not comfortable for me.
Right. But that means that it's probably really good guidance, and it's really actually right on guidance, right? And I get it, it's a little opposite of what the guide is saying here, but here is a discernment, right? And the guide often speaks also about, this need for inner stillness and silence. What we have to do is drop into the being state and let the doing arise from out of that. And that means dropping into the not knowing, the not doing, and having patience for the process, for the train to start again. It's like your train pulled into the station. It's accomplished a piece of its mission. You're refilling I don't know, whatever it needs to do, right? And it's not ready to pull out yet. And so you do. And then it's like exactly so noticing the discomfort that's there in that movement. It's like non-movement is your current, movement of the process. And you don't like it, and you find the resistance there. And so then it's working again with resistance, but now this time to, the resistance to the non-movement, and to get more conscious of it and to feel, what brings the agitation? What's so difficult about it, right? It's like all of that is unconscious, but it can be made conscious. It's got within it embedded, it's got the image, it's got the history, and so when we go in and feel and sit with the feeling, oftentimes we begin to translate the story and the understanding from there. So, it's part of the journey is to feel what's there. And when we're feeling resistance, a lot of times, resistance itself is uncomfortable, right? And so again, how can you maybe feel some part of in even just a contraction of your muscle in your body, at your heart or at your gut, or some inner no contraction place, right? And just be with it for a minute, and just say, I see you, and I'm not gonna judge you or fight you or anything. I'm just kind of curious. I just want to get to know you. I just want to help you and understand you. So I'm not imposing anything, right? You're in charge. And then just kind of like welcome it to, like, I hear your no. Can you tell me more? What are you afraid of? What is your projected idea of what's going to happen, if you just sit here, or if what's uncomfortable, like what are your fears and the not moving, right?
Yeah,
And
no, I got it. I can see it. It's my life has been, you have to be productive to be alive. So it feels somewhat deadening, like I'm just going to shrivel up and turn into a snail or something.
so that's the fear, the belief from the image, right? That's driven you, right? Sort of in this, but can you feel like from that place, it's kind of not really organic. It's kind of compulsory.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been driven like that virtually my whole life.
So that kind of like is where when we can see, okay, so this is the natural way of being, but the natural way has some downsides, and we adopted it because it kind of worked, and it was the best we could do, and we needed something, but then to really open to the possibility that our fear of relaxation or, rest or, nothing, holding open, is really actually instead what it'll feel great. It's like, and out of that, some new, deeper inspiration and contact with our real self will emerge, or, so it's like, it could be really cool, and we can't give ourselves the space to just drop in and see what happens, right? Or and we have to kind of get past this agitation that's kind of the gatekeeper to know what really is gonna, what it'll really feel like, because what we're actually feeling is just the fear of the feeling that we don't even know what it is. So we have to kind of go through these barriers, and so we have the fear of the fear, right? Or the fear of a feeling, and we don't even, we're resistant to knowing what that feeling is because we're so afraid of it. So we have to risk dropping, out of that resistance and fall into the feeling. And that feels, it is a shaman's death in some way.
Yep, no, I got you. Yeah, I got you. You got a lot of words in there, but I got it.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry for the disruption. I'm just going to let it go to voicemail, hopefully.
Okay.
Go
I,
ahead.
what, okay, so I have known before I even got into Pathwork, I came down for a weekend, and I was talking about my anxiety, which is what I
I'm
always
on a
talk
call,
about.
Scott. I'll get with you later.
Okay.
Sorry, Eileen, I was just having to deal with that. Go ahead.
Okay, that's okay. And some of the people there said, well, we are getting negative pleasure from the anxiety. So I was working on it this week, trying to feel into it and ask, okay, I know it's the woundedness and stuff. And so I did some anger stuff with letting some anger out, and then squeezing the towel and stuff. And finally not a voice, I don't hear voices, but it's something inside me said to me, you want to keep, not those words, you want to keep the anxiety because if people pay attention to you, and that's the way you feel like you're loved. And so, and then of course that goes back to, and sure enough, that's how I got attention from my mom. And that's the only time I got attention, because there were 7 other children.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
and so when I had bad nerves, she came and gave me, because she had them too. And so now and it was kind of like, it's first time that I really, really believe that the part of my payoff is that I get attention I go to Course in Miracles, in Pathwork, everywhere. It's all about the anxiety. So I get attention. Attention to me means love, that people care about me. So I thought, wow, and I just did in Course in Miracles last Friday, talking about the anxiety and how, oh, poor me, oh, look at me. I'm so, the pitiful, I've had this my whole life. I can't get rid of it, and so I'm getting attention. That's my,
So yeah, it's beautiful that you're seeing.
Yeah.
And then, like, again, the tendency is to judge some kind, the childish part that needs that kind of attention, but it's like more important to see, oh, some part of me must really still be starved for attention, and I don't know how to get love except through this, right? So
Yeah.
so like you can begin to kind of, the adult wakes up in this and can help the child now, because what the guide is saying is we have to visualize, the process of visualization. We have to imagine, another way that you might feel love, or that you might know that you're loved, that comes to you outside of, getting the attention for the anxiety, right?
Yeah. I don't know what that would be.
Exactly. What is it about me that's lovable that will, or how will people come to me, or like if I don't have the anxiety. And so if you can't imagine that, you won't be able to let go of the anxiety, right? You have to have love. And if this is
Yeah,
your only source, right? So,
yeah.
but you can begin now because it's conscious to wonder about that, like, well,
Okay.
what could be
That's,
beyond that? Yeah, good.
yeah, yeah, you're right. Think about what can I be, or how can I be with my family that I would feel like they love me, or anybody as far as that
How can
goes.
I feel loved without anxiety?
Yeah, that's good. How can I feel love without anxiety? Thank you. That helps. Thank you.
So all these decisions that you make constantly, if you test yourself as to the meaning of the decisions, then at least you will stop the creation of an illusory and false reality that gives so much pain and fear. Illusory reality may sound like a contradiction, but it is not, for you constantly manufacture and believe in temporary illusory realities. Life on earth is the best example of it. It is therefore essential that you question yourself deeply about how you relate to your own process and what that means. Then, when you have answered yourself, the next question should be, what is the meaning of this answer? Are you really allowing that inner movement to guide you? It is only at the beginning of each such decision that making it seems an effort. But in that effort in itself is one of the illusions that we create by our constant belief in falsity. In this case, that non-movement is effortless and movement is struggle. In reality, the effort lies in staying behind and resisting movement, while effortlessness, ease, and inner relaxation lie in the harmony that is being established between the ego and the inner process of movement through the decision to follow at the same speed and to discover the meaning of your process. So whatever is coming up for us, to just try to say yes to it instead of no, right? Is it like that yes and no, and trust in the, we're not saying yes, oh, everything is perfect, but saying, yes, let me see what this is trying to unfold into. It's bringing up no's, or it's, it's alarm bells are going off, but I don't really know, and if I can, trust that even by doing that, it's like I can be in harmony with that. It's part of my journey, and what I need to work with right now in this moment is, the alarms that I'm feeling. And then as we just keep working with it and trusting, and not judging and rejecting ourselves or situations and circumstances, then, we begin to stay on the train. So this brings me to the next aspect of this topic, which is that there is no event in your life, big or small, outer or inner, that is not an intrinsic message or a meaningful manifestation of the whole process. Your task and path consist of deciphering these messages, of understanding the meaning behind the events or moods you are in. So you thought about, your moods being, messages as well. To the degree you make deliberate efforts to do so, you will succeed, though not immediately and not always in a straight line. But the meaning will evolve surely and inexorably, and the more this is the case, the deeper your security, peace, and joy will be. Conversely, the meaning of your life and your experience, your moods and states of mind, will never take on deeper meaning without serious effort and commitment. When you experience events as isolated, haphazard happenings, life must appear meaningless, frightening, confusing, and burdensome. When you begin to perceive the incredible meaningfulness, the much wider wisdom and purpose of every event, how it is deeply connected with and part of the wise and wholesome totality of your life, of the sequence of life, then all fear and confusion must vanish, because everything you experience has its deepest meaning and connection. So when we truly see and understand and connect with and I'm not sure even on Earth if we can ever like fully know everything about its deepest meaning and connection, but we can certainly, once we find a deep, deep meaning and connection, I always feel what the guide is saying, that, the fear and confusion vanishes. And sometimes maybe there's still fear of facing something in the story, but that's where I can, like trust that I'm sort of being primed and prepared, in a way to have resilience, to have strength, to have conviction, to have courage, right? And to find a way to communicate that, will hopefully, bring a different conclusion than what I'm fearing.
Well,
So
can you roll back just a little bit, because you're a little bit higher or lower? Let's see. Which that there is no event in your life, big or small, outer or inner, that is not an intrinsic message or meaningful manifestation of the whole process. Your task and path consists of deciphering these messages, understanding the meanings of events, are moods you are in. So I just say that because it's
worth repeating.
it's where I'm at. It's like I've been waiting for the meaning to come out of this stuff I'm in, and there's the meaning
Not
is
clear.
not ready. It's not. It's not. Yeah. To experience not experiencing anything, which is kind of an oxymoron, but yeah, just kind of be floating in the water, kind of, and I can't force the messages. I can't. Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
we can't force. I mean, I don't know. Are you actively exploring?
I think I am. I mean, I'm on the call with you here.
I mean, you kind of use this, image of just floating, and so that feels maybe a little too passive. But I think you're right. You have to sometimes, sometimes the inner conflict or the confusion, it can't be discerned yet. Something more has to happen, something more unfolding, more clarity, sometimes, within, like, Yelena was talking about, bingo, the light goes on, for all of these years, all of a sudden she sees this whole thing, and so, we're often waiting for those kind of things.
Yeah, and just holding it and making the waiting okay is a massive change right there.
Exactly. I know. I agree. I think you're doing great, Dick. Like you're really working it. That's what I think is part of the, like we're not following the line of least resistance, which would be to try to fix it or do something, keep doing things or something. So, you're working with that kind of discipline within your being, kind of from a place that knows, that this is somehow what you need to do. You may not even know why you know that, but you know that, and so you're trusting it and working it, and it's not fun, and but it will definitely yield, I think, its results, good results, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a choice. I'm just choosing to say that there's something here that I need to learn, and I'll just have to let it speak when it's ready to speak. And it's kind of teaching me about my obsession with production all the time, being produced. Yeah.
Exactly, if nothing else, for sure. Yeah. And it may be connected, right? There may be something. So I would just keep following it. You're doing great.
Thanks. I got a program that says productivity equals self-worth. And that's a damn uncomfortable.
Right. So kind of the same thing, like with, Yulene having to imagine, how to be loved without anxiety, how to, you need to know how to have worth without productivity.
You got it.
So where were we? So, just repeating again that, everything has meaning and purpose. And when we experience things kind of as isolated, haphazard happenings, life is frightening and confusing and burdensome. And then when we begin to perceive a meaningfulness and a much wiser wisdom and purpose behind every event, that's how we can kind of relax into faith, how we can begin to trust, how we can kind of ground ourselves more deeply in our life. I really believe that, like we get born, but we don't fully incarnate until, we're at least 80 years old or something. I don't know, that we're on this journey of increasing incarnation, which is also the whole developmental process that we're going through. And we no children go through a developmental process, but the whole human does, right? And so when we can perceive and understand that process, it really helps us. I don't always know what it is, but I've been through enough of them, and I kind of grok this in some way, like there's some part of me that just kind of accepts and knows it, that it does sustain me, when things are all kind of crazy, like I can, hold the space of like just waiting or, trusting somehow that there's some meaning that I don't quite fully understand yet, and that keeps me from overreacting, taking, circumstances in my own hands that often, is my self-will or my defenses that are not going to work very well. So our awareness can be established only when our outer consciousness is willing to make an effort to overcome the existing temptations to yield in the direction of least resistance. Even though you may no longer pay lip service to coincidence, your emotional reactions are still geared to it as if your experience were a product of it. If only this or that would have happened differently, then I would be happy. Or if only this particular person could react differently, then all would be well. These familiar reactions, although not necessarily expressed in these exact words, indicate a lingering belief that life is haphazard and that your state of mind depends on others and on circumstances that have little, if anything, to do with a meaningful reality beyond the surface.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this really, to me, speaks of how it helps us to kind of reclaim, our self-responsibility and understand that, if it's happening to us, and we're having a reaction, it's like it's really happening for us, and it's not a problem of somebody else doing it. If they're being our good enemy, they're being our, upu guru, our, challenging, awakener. So it's not their fault, it's like it's something again that we're producing that's here for us. And so this is why if we go the other way, and project it and, not take responsibility, we can become depressed, anxious, confused. It is only when you ask yourself about whatever happens to you every day and every hour of your life, how could this be a message or a reflection or an indication or a sign of a total picture about my life and its course that I still do not completely grasp? That you will gain meaningful answers, that the inner cohesive reality will reveal itself to you. Then all the little pieces of your life, your experience, your state of mind will fall into place. Believe me, my friends, there is nothing you experience that does not have to be exactly the way it is. I love this one too. This is not because some deity predestines it for you in a spirit of punishment or reward. That kind of thinking totally misses the point. It is much rather like this. Your experiences are the product of where you are on your inner journey within your own process. This is why you cannot be at any other place. In other words, we are where we are. And we can't get any other place except by going from where we are through what it is and into the next level. So, it's like, again, in the Daime, a lot of the hymns say, remain in your place. We have to learn to be where we are, remain in our place. So let us assume an organism, human or any other, is very angry, very self-rejecting, very impatient because its own growth process is only halfway accomplished. Let us assume a child is angry and impatient, guilty, and self-rejecting because it is not yet an adult. Would that not be foolish? Right? See, he's comparing. Do you get it? You know, like if you are in a space where you are angry and self-rejecting and impatient because you feel like you're not as far along as you should be, or, you know, you missed the train, or you're, you know, didn't follow it, or whatever, you know, may even be true, right? You know, but as long as, you know, you're in this angry, self-rejecting space, it's only, you know, it's useless, you know, it's senseless. He says, like, it's like a child being angry and impatient and guilty and self-rejecting because it's not yet an adult. And we can kind of understand, you know, why the child gets that way, you know, because it, you know, wants to be further than it is. But it's kind of like it does have to grow, you know, it has to take step by step. It has to be in the process. And ultimately, that's part of surrender, you know, to surrender to just being where we are, not further along like we think we should be.
Tough one.
Trust, it's right where we need to be. It's right where we are. Go ahead, Dick.
No, that's a tough one. I've always had to be farther than I am. That's my whole life. And that's a big, that's like a fighting against reality always. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah. And so it's good just to, you know, like, I mean, again, it's embedded in us. We're programmed with it. It's like a virus in the in the machine program, you know. And so it's not like we should blame ourselves or judge ourselves, but the more that we can like realize the effect of it and how that, you know, actually doesn't serve, you know, makes it harder, whatever, then that helps us kind of have this inner, like in the beginning, it talked about our free will, our choice, right? And it's not so easy when we've got resistance, you know, to stay with the train, you know. So we have to kind of find a deep inner commitment and make this deep inner choice inside, you know, and sometimes we can't do it ourselves, you know, we make the choice saying, this is what I want, God, help me do it, right? Help me stand to just not do anything right now, you know. Help me follow my guidance, right, as best I can, and give me the strength or the courage or the patience or all of the qualities that I need to accomplish this, you know, understanding of what I'm trying to do right now. So again, you know, believe me, my friends, there's nothing you experience that doesn't have to be exactly the way it is. You know, it's like, so this is how it's God's will. It's just what is, you know, it's like, so to accept and to trust that somehow that is in divine perfection in this moment. That it may be difficult, that it may be painful, that it may be shaking us in big ways, notwithstanding. And yet when it's challenging like that, you know, like oftentimes, you know, we judge ourselves and try to figure it out or control it, you know, and then we can't, and we reject ourselves, and then we have no access to the help of the divine that we need, right? You know, like when the shaking starts, when we are little and not able to, you know, really, you know, be with it with ourselves, like that's when we can ask for that help. And oftentimes, if we can calm ourselves enough, it's there, we receive it. I ask for strength, here comes strength. You know, God in heaven sends it, right? It can be like that if we can open the portals in a way and get out of the programming that says I got to do it myself, or, you know, I'm bad if I can't do it. So The growth process is in itself beautiful, meaningful, and to be respected. It is the same with the evolutionary process that includes the purification of distortions and negativity. If an organism is only half grown, that is exactly where that organism is, and to scold it or for it to scold itself is senseless. Only when that state is fully accepted and not obstructed, when its meaning with its ramifications is clear, which includes an assessment of the effect of negativity, that is the growth process. Then the process is free to evolve. The sentence was a little convoluted, but I think we got basically. So when we, accept and not obstruct what is, then we can receive and understand it, and then, also see where the resistance, where the negativity is coming from. And in that, it's part of the growth process, which frees it to evolve. So rejection of the current state and anger about it are obstructions that are like barricades, prohibiting the train from taking its course. If you apply this principle to the physical level, it is easy to see. Imagine that you squeeze a growing physical organism into a tight container. This would thwart the growth and cripple the organism. It is the same with mental and psychic processes. Misunderstanding the dynamics, meaning, and necessity of growth with its process of purification, consciousness expansion, and deepening of perception, and thus feeling impatient about your present state, only leads to self-hate, denial, repression, self-justification, and projecting onto others. This in turn leads to more negativity, real guilt, and confusion. In short, crippling the growing organism.
Ouch.
Yeah. And I mean, it's what we do most of our lives, right? So again, it's to recognize it without judgment, and humble ourselves to just realize, we don't know any better, and we're doing the best we can, and it is a process. And so, again, trusting that we're still loved by God, all of it is unfolding, working with us as best it can to help us awaken and find joy and happiness in life.
No, I get it. It's just, I'm just viewing my past history.
Right. Recognizing I represent that remark. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's good to see, especially if we can see it in compassion. Offhand, it may appear as if this attitude of impatience with the limited state of the self indicated an eagerness to grow and goodwill toward a more perfected state of consciousness. These attitudes are, of course, the original divine qualifications behind the distorted expression. And this is good to know. But it is just as important to know that the way this manifests is in distortion and is far from furthering the growth process. So again, we can even acknowledge that underneath our, frustration and our negative attitude, is this deep desire to be more perfected and to be more conscious. So we can, recognize that it's not going to happen with a forcing current and it's hurting us to go that way. But the original intent and motive is also has divine levels to it. So you can see where you are once free. You can see where you free yourself of the additional unnecessary burden and negativity of the denial of your present state. Denial and repression lead to self-justification, destructive guilt, and blaming of others. Your pathwork helps you to shed these burdens. Then you can perceive your present state for which you have entered the process of evolution, for which you have contracted for a chain of incarnations. You are thus part of the divine plan to bring light into the void. Think of that, you're not the messed up problem that you think you are. You're part of the divine plan to bring light into the void. Wherever your manifest consciousness has forgotten its connection and lost touch with its divine nature, There lies your task, which is destined to reestablish the connection. Can you feel that? Can you take that in?
Yeah, pretty
Ignorant.
powerful.
Go ahead.
Just pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, to me, again, it's this life-giving story that's so different than the ego that's kind of always judging, right? And it's like the ego thinks that it can control by judging, right? And it seeks safety and control. But what this lecture is saying is that safety is in the flow, in the going with the train. And, that, when we can do that, another, beauty comes into existence, and we're here, even in our difficulty, we're here on this work trying to bring more light into the void. That's our nature. We are the light. So whatever we're carrying, we are working with, consciously or unconsciously. And the soul is, trying to transform and, free itself. So whatever your manifest consciousness has forgotten, wherever your manifest consciousness has forgotten its connection and lost touch with its divine nature, there lies your task, which is destined to establish the connection. Ignorance of these principles and truths leads to hating the incomplete present state, which in turn results in hate of self, therefore fear of self, therefore resistance to the whole of your being. To view it impartially, assess it objectively, and infuse it with truth. You can see the logical sequence of psychic events here in clear demonstration. When you no longer fear and hate yourself, you will not fear and resist the journey. You will go with it. When you have nothing to fear in you, you have nothing to fear of the journey of life, of change. On the contrary, you will look for the different landscapes with joy and excitement in complete trust. You must understand, my friends, the inexorable connection between fear of self and fear of life, as opposed to total commitment to all of the self, hence increasing loss of fear of self, trust in self, trust in life. I'm going to read that again because I couldn't follow myself. You must understand, my friends, the inexorable connection between fear of self and fear of life, as opposed to total commitment to all of the self, hence increasing loss. So if we commit to ourself totally, right, then this is a little bit convoluted the way the language is working here, but increasing the loss of fear of self. So we will fear less our loss of self, and we will trust in self and trust in life. Making the total commitment to ourself means making the total commitment to following harmoniously the movement of our process. Hating and rejecting your present state means fearing yourself, which means obstructing your journey and movement, which means missing your train. Each process is intrinsically your own, different from the next one. Each individual has his or her own reality, even though that reality must be in concordance with the universal reality based on its laws and truths. The acceptance of the state you are in leads to going with your movement, with your process, fearlessly letting out what there may be. My friends, let these words be an incentive and inspiration to you to make a fuller and more total commitment to all of yourself. For in that way, you will find the trust in your inner process and understand its truly heavenly beauty. You will know its language that will communicate itself to you, and through which you will discover the immeasurable beauty of that process, the wisdom of it, the meaning of it, and the peace that is contained in it. You will feel the ongoing aliveness that you know you possess and are a part of, regardless of outer manifestation. The outer manifestations are, as I said, in themselves, a meaningful and alive part of the whole, even though they may momentarily seem painful, ugly, and not alive. But when you make the connection between the manifestation and your process, your perception changes drastically, and what you experienced as senseless and therefore frightening and ugly suddenly becomes fused with divine meaning. A number of laws apply to the evolutionary inner process. These laws must not be confused with the general universal laws, which apply to all states of consciousness and to all entities. They apply to those beyond the evolutionary process, to those not yet within the evolutionary process, as well as those who are within it. But then there are the laws of the process itself that apply only to those who have entered into this process. Some of these laws you will learn in the course of our future lectures. Now I would like to speak about two important such laws, which will be very useful for you to work with. The first law is that the further the inner consciousness is advanced in one's own process, or to put it differently, the greater one's spiritual potentiality to go with the process, to be aware of it and to understand it in its meaning, the greater must be the repercussion if that potentiality is not developed. If you are, for example, ready to follow such a demanding path of self-confrontation and growth, but resist your experience and states of mind, you will lack peace, joy, meaning, and aliveness. This is not true of an individual who is simply not yet at the point where such a path can be followed. So when we're not quite there yet, we don't feel the same inner conflict around kind of part of us jumping off of the train, so to speak, right? We feel it inside of ourselves. And then it adds to our complexity and conflict and, confusion. So when I speak of repercussions, I do not necessarily mean tragedy, although that too is a part of it. The greater the discrepancy between your spiritual potentiality and the actual direction you take in life, the more severe your experiences are. But often it is not a tragic event that indicates such a discrepancy. It may even be more often a chronic state of depression, anxiety, and indeed disconnectedness. The same principle applies to those who are ready on such a path. They may on the whole be committed to it, but keep a part of themselves in reserve. They do not commit all of themselves to the process. They hold back in fear, shame, secrecy, and the wishful thinking that this will not matter. So see if, because sometimes, we're stuck in other reasons and stuff, but sometimes if we can see that we're holding back in any of these, it can be useful to recognize. The resulting and inevitable blindness, be it only momentary, must present experiences that are puzzling, painful, disquieting, confusing, or that simply rob you of momentary peace. Learn to view your daily, even your hourly life so that you see what your moods, your experiences, and perceptions reveal about your process. And I think moods are really useful to kind of, there's an inner atmosphere, an inner weather pattern, that I wake up in the morning sometimes and notice, there's this weather pattern, and sometimes it changes, or sometimes I feel like, I want to work with it to help it change because it's not really conducive to what I'm trying to do or whatever. And then we learn more about, who they are and what they're here for and that kind of thing. And then you'll go with the process and recognize that the disturbance is a reflection of some blindness. The blindness lies often in a totally different direction from the one you have consciously fear and assume. The moment you know that, you have the freedom and the possibility to use this knowledge as your gauge, your doorway, and your key. Do you have to allow the discrepancy between your process and your ego state to accumulate into more disturbing elements so that the repercussions become more unpleasant? This is not a punishment, my friends. It is the grace of God that has made it so, in order to help you to not stay behind in a useless stagnation, to give you the incentive, if you only choose to open your eyes, to use these experiences and pray deeply for the guidance to understand and to let yourself to be open to the guidance and trust yourself to the will of God and to go with it and let yourself be carried with it. Make on the one hand all effort possible to see, to comprehend, to search deeply for the meaning, to overcome resistance. On the other hand, surrender yourself to the inner movement that will carry you. These are not two contradictory attitudes. They are mutually interdependent. Use the positive ego attributes for the effort to overcome resistance, and also surrender the ego control to the guidance of the divine inner will and movement. You have the potential, if you keep this up, to create a faultlessly peaceful and happy life. Being in the human shell of blindness, you have to battle against the as yet unrealized and undeveloped aspects in yourself. Use every opportunity to avoid staying behind. This will prevent repercussions to a considerable degree. The degree is really all that matters, for some blindness, as I said, is quite inevitable. The more your path progresses, the more aware you become of the inner meaning of the process. You can take the tiniest disturbing mood and ask yourself, what does this mean for my inner process? Where am I blind? What could I see differently? The second law I wish to speak about is making connections. When connections are made, the process evolves in its full glory. When connections are not made, the process remains hidden and events take on an isolated and disquieting appearance. You have to make connections primarily between your outer experiences and the inner process, on the one hand, and on the other between your inner attitudes that seem totally disconnected from one another. Let me briefly speak about both. The first, connections between the outer life, your inner moods, reactions, and process can be made only in the way I said before. First, consider the possibility of such a connection. Open yourself up to its realization. The moment you raise the question and open up to receiving the answer, the meaning will communicate itself to you sooner or later. As the meaning becomes clear, as you begin to see all experiences as intrinsically meaningful events relating to your total inner reality and to your entire path, as well as every particle thereof, you will gain a totally new and infinitely more connected understanding of life. The second category, making connections between inner aspects, problematic aspects, for example, is something you begin to experience as you progress on your path. But much more of that can and will happen. You discover in the course of your path apparently isolated problems, outer as well as inner, such as faults, shortcomings, impurities, conflicts, difficulties, whose inner dynamics you as yet ignore. And they seem to have nothing to do with one another. And yet, as you go deeper, there is a direct connection between the apparently disconnected attitudes and aspects. For example, what connection could there be between a difficulty in establishing fulfilling relationships and a blockage in your career? Or what connection could exist between a greedy and pushing attitude and, say, sexual dissatisfaction? Or between submissiveness, lack of self-assertion on the one hand, and covert hostility on the other? I could name many more such examples. Seeing the connection between them will give you a wholesome sense of meaning and a new understanding. Suddenly, things are no longer so fragmented and anxiety-producing. First, you may only sense overall connections, but little by little, it will become a real and strong understanding in depth. The parts of the whole are all put together. There is nothing in you that does not connect with everything else, whether good, bad, or indifferent, positive or negative. Not only are various positive aspects that seem different in kind from one another connected, not only are different negative aspects connected, but positive and negative aspects are also directly linked on an inner level. To establish the connection, you can and should use your mental abilities to whatever degree you can in a spirit of exercising your mind. But the insights must primarily come from within. You must allow the intuitive faculties to provide you with the connections. Then everything will take on a new form, a new shape. Sometimes we can kind of like figure it out or think about it, and make the connections from a mental way. But he's talking here about what we're doing when we go in and feel the feelings and be with the experience and the resistance and the energies and intuit from that connection and presence with it, what its meaning is, just like what you got, Yulene, with this new understanding about your anxiety. So it's very important for you to understand these two laws. Such an understanding will help you make the deliberate choice of finding out what your outer life means in terms of your inner process. Renew the daily choice and commitment to trusting the movement of that process. So, he's suggesting, and I need to remember this too, to make it a daily meditation prayer process, some kind of, maybe conscious attempt to make this choice of commitment to trusting the movement of my day, and then maybe noticing where I fall short of that or whatever, but, like to align in that direction. And the more you do this, the more exhilarated your consciousness and energetic system will become, the more joyful, peaceful, secure, and meaningful your life will be. Meaningful in terms of the total creative process, not just for this one individual lifespan. You will know and sense deeply that you are a part of a larger process, of which this one little lifespan is only a small link in a very long chain. As I leave you and give you blessing and love, I want to say to all of you that there is so much growth, so much change happening in so many of my friends. There is so much sincere devotion to your path and so many real fruits that you begin to reap. That is a beautiful sight for us in spirit. We see the form of it, we see the light of it, we see the glory of it, and we know the value of it, how you contribute to all of life with each little individual step of progress you make. You are blessed, all of you, my dearest, dearest friends. Be in peace. Okay.
Wow, it seems like there were 3 lectures in one lecture here. It's
Yeah, a
awesome.
lot of stuff in there. Beautiful lecture, I think, and like a little dense in some places with the language, but yeah, I think it's good to kind of maybe even just revisit or reread or just kind of meditate with for a little while and kind of engrave it in our hearts, right? To try to remember these teachings and apply them as much as we can.
Yes, thank you, Darlene.
Did that leave you? I mean, you had a kind of nice breakthrough a little while ago. So are you still holding that space? And did this help it, or did you kind of feel sort of back in your struggle more lately?
No, I'm, yeah, no, I feel like I made a breakthrough, and a lot of things. I made a lot of notes tonight, and I particularly like the everyday daily meditation that to make the commitment that I will align with whatever happens and trust that whatever happens is what's supposed to happen, is part of my evolution process. So thank you very much for
Beautiful.
tonight.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Okay. Good night,
See you.
everybody.
Good night, Dick.
Good night, Yulene and Darlene. So yeah, see you next time, and thanks, Darlene. We're really quite good for me. Thanks.
Good, good. Good night, everybody.